The string quartet's first notes floated like fragile glass through the candlelit chapel, but the sound barely touched me. My breath caught somewhere between my chest and throat, a quiet battle I refused to let anyone hear. The late afternoon sun spilled through stained glass, splashing my silk dress in shards of crimson and gold. I shifted on the pew, the cool satin of my skirt whispering against the polished wood, as if it, too, sensed the tension humming in my veins. My phone, hidden in the clutch on my lap, gave a soft buzz, a reminder of the text I'd read an hour earlier. Wait until you see the surprise. I hadn't recognized the number, and I hadn't dared reply. I tucked a loose strand of hair behind my pearl-studded ear and kept my gaze on the aisle. Bridesmaids glided forward like watercolor brushstrokes, bouquets trembling in their hands. I could smell the faint sweetness of gardenias from where I sat, an old family favorite. And then I saw her, my younger sister, Madison, radiant in ivory lace. She smiled with a glow that should have made me proud. Instead, my pulse roared in my ears. Because there he was, the groom, standing at the altar with the same half-smile I once thought belonged only to me. Ethan Reynolds, my ex-husband, the man I once promised forever. I steadied my chin, forcing a calm I did not feel. Around me, whispers of admiration and the faint clink of champagne glasses carried on, as if the universe hadn't just tilted. I breathed in, tasted the metallic tang of old heartbreak, and smiled. 3 years earlier, the morning I walked out of Ethan's house was cold enough to sting. The April air had that damp bite that seeps into your bones, the kind that makes you wonder if spring will ever truly arrive. I remember standing in our narrow kitchen, the faint smell of last night's burnt coffee still clinging to the walls, staring at the silent phone on the counter. Ethan had already left for work. Early again. No note, no text. Just the lingering echo of a door that had closed with a quiet finality I couldn't unhear. It wasn't one argument that broke us. It was a slow accumulation, promises that thinned to excuses, dinners eaten in silence, his gaze drifting to somewhere I couldn't follow. I'd catch him staring at his phone with a half-smile he never offered me anymore. When I asked, he'd shrug, say it was work. But I knew better. The night it all snapped, we were sitting at opposite ends of the couch, a chasm of unspoken words between us. I told him I'd seen the messages, flirty, unmistakable. His jaw tightened, eyes avoiding mine. "Lauren," he said, voice low and measured, "you're imagining things. You always overthink." That single sentence, so dismissive, so practiced, burned hotter than any confession could have. My hands shook, a tremor I tried to hide by pressing my palms together. "I'm not imagining this," I whispered, the lump in my throat making each word a small war. "I deserve better than a ghost of a marriage." He said nothing, not even when I stood, the old hardwood groaning beneath my heels. Not when I pulled my grandmother's locket from the dresser, a small silver heart she'd given me the day she died, engraved with the words, "Keep your courage close." Her voice, soft and steady, came back to me as I clasped the chain around my neck. "Lauren, life will test you, but you are braver than you think." I left the key on the counter beside a cooling cup of untouched coffee and walked out, the locket warm against my skin. Behind me, the house stayed silent. Ahead of me, the world felt like an open wound and a clean slate all at once. The first months after I left Ethan were a blur of exhaustion and second-guessing. My small apartment in downtown Portland smelled of cardboard and fresh paint, the scent of starting over. The walls were bare, the furniture secondhand, but every creak of the floorboards belonged to me. I worked days as a junior designer at a boutique marketing agency, an entry-level position that barely covered rent, and spent nights teaching myself everything my college courses had skimmed over. Branding strategy, motion graphics, client pitching. I'd collapse onto the couch at midnight, fingers still tingling from the glow of my laptop, wondering if I'd made a colossal mistake. On those nights, I'd reach for my grandmother's locket, thumb tracing the engraved words, "Keep your courage close." Sometimes I whispered it aloud just to hear the strength in my own voice. About 3 months in, my supervisor, an elegant, sharp-eyed creative director named Denise Harper, called me into her glass-walled office. Denise wore power like a tailored suit. I braced for critique, but she simply held up the rebranding mock-ups I'd slipped into the internal drive. "These," she said, tapping the pages, "aren't junior level. Who taught you this?" "No one." I admitted, my palms damp. Her red-lacquered nails tapped again. "Good. Don't let anyone tell you to shrink your ideas. I want you leading our next pitch." The word startled me more than any reprimand could. "Led?" I barely trusted my own heartbeat. But Denise smiled like she saw something I hadn't yet uncovered. From that day forward, I chased opportunity like oxygen. I arrived before dawn, left long after the city lights blurred into the night. I studied competitors, refined proposals, and practiced presentations until my voice grew steady. There were stumbles, clients who dismissed me as too young, nights when invoices threatened to sink me, but each small win lit a quiet fire. The first time a national brand signed a year-long contract based on a concept I spearheaded, Denise handed me the signed paperwork with a grin. "You just paid for your own raise," she said. That night I walked home through drizzle that sparkled under street lamps, damp hair clinging to my cheeks, and for the first time since leaving Ethan, I didn't feel like someone escaping. I felt like someone becoming. Over the next 2 years, I rose from junior designer to partner in a new spin-off firm, Denise, and I built from scratch. We poured every ounce of creative grit into that studio, and it flourished. Clients across the country, campaigns in magazines I'd once only flipped through at the salon. My family knew I'd found work, but I kept the scale of my success quiet. When they asked, I offered vague smiles and stories about a small agency gig. I let them picture me modestly scraping by, never guessing that my name now appeared in trade journals and that I was quietly building a life and a fortune on my own terms. I wasn't hiding out of spite. I was protecting something sacred, the version of me no betrayal could touch. The reception hall shimmered beneath a canopy of golden string lights, every bulb casting a soft, honeyed glow over linen-draped tables. Crystal glasses caught the light like tiny prisms. The scent of gardenias, Madison's favorite, mingled with the warm sweetness of vanilla frosting from the towering wedding cake. I stood near the back of the room, the grandmother's locket resting against the hollow of my throat, cool and steady. My champagne flute was half full, but the bubbles had long since gone flat. From across the room, Ethan laughed at something a groomsman whispered, his familiar half-smile curling like a memory I didn't ask for. Madison, radiant in her lace gown, moved from guest to guest with the ease of someone who'd never questioned her place in the world. A tap on my shoulder pulled me back. My mother's voice, polite but laced with curiosity, hovered close. "Lauren, dear, you've been so quiet tonight. You will look different." "More," she hesitated, eyes narrowing slightly. "Accomplished." I gave her a small, practiced smile. "Just life, Mom." The band shifted to a soft jazz number, the low notes like a heartbeat beneath the chatter. Madison clinked a spoon against her glass. The room hushed. "Before the dancing begins," she said, her voice bright with champagne and nerves, "my sister has something to share." My head snapped toward her. I hadn't planned to speak. Madison only winked. Dozens of eyes turned my way. For a heartbeat, the air felt thin. Then Denise's voice, steady and sure, echoed in my mind, "Don't let anyone tell you to shrink your ideas." I set down my glass and stepped forward, the click of my heels punctuating the silence. "Good evening," I began, letting my voice carry without strain. "Madison and Ethan, congratulations. You've created a beautiful night." I let the words linger just long enough to draw in a slow, curious hush. "I suppose most of you know me as the one who disappeared for a while." A ripple of polite laughter. I needed that time. I needed to rebuild. I paused, meeting Ethan's gaze. For the briefest second, his smile faltered. When I left the city 3 years ago, I walked out of a life that didn't fit anymore. I left behind a marriage, yes, But more importantly, I left behind a version of myself who doubted her own worth. My voice steadied, low and clear. Tonight, I stand here as co-founder of Harper and Mitchell Creative, an agency that, in 2 years, has grown to serve national brands and a roster of clients I once only dreamed of. A soft gasp rippled through the crowd. My mother's hand covered her mouth. My father's brows shot upward. Even the band's saxophonist missed a beat. I smiled, not unkindly. I didn't share this before because I needed to know I was building it for me, not for approval, not for validation. For me. I touched the locket at my throat, feeling the gentle press of engraved words against my skin. And to my sister, Madison, you've found your path in your own way, as I have in mine. I wish you joy. But let's all remember, the greatest vows we ever take are the ones we make to ourselves. The hall stayed silent for a heartbeat that stretched like eternity. Then applause erupted, hesitant at first, then warm and unbroken. I caught Ethan's eyes once more. There it was, the flicker of something he couldn't mask, regret, maybe envy. But it didn't matter, because I wasn't here for him. I was here for me. The applause softened into a low murmur as the band picked up a mellow tune, the notes sliding like silk through the hall. I slipped back toward my table, the locket a cool weight against my skin, my heartbeat settling into something steady, like the quiet after a storm. Madison found me first. Her cheeks flushed pink beneath the soft sweep of her veil. For a moment, she looked like the little sister who used to steal my sweaters and beg me to braid her hair. "Lauren," she breathed, voice trembling just enough to betray her nerves. I didn't know. I studied her, the glint of wedding lights catching in her blue eyes. "I never wanted you to," I said gently. Not until I was sure of who I was becoming. But I let the word hang, like the pause before a truth. I also never imagined you'd marry Ethan. Her face tightened, a flicker of guilt passing like a shadow. It wasn't planned. He reached out months after you left. We didn't mean for it to hurt you. I held her gaze. It's not the marriage that hurt. It was the silence. You could have trusted me with the truth. Madison's eyes brimmed, her lip trembling. You're right. I should have. I was jealous of how brave you were. You left and built something. I felt like the one who stayed behind. The honesty in her voice softened something inside me. I reached for her hand, squeezing lightly. If we're going to be sisters, not just in name, then honesty can't be optional. That's my only condition. She nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. I promise. Across the room, my parents approached, their expressions an uneasy blend of pride and shame. My father cleared his throat first. "Lauren, your mother and I, didn't realize how much we underestimated you." I met their eyes, compassion threading through my resolve. I don't need apologies. But if you want a relationship with me now, it has to be built on respect. No more comments about how I need someone to take care of me. No more subtle doubts. My mother's voice cracked. You have our respect. More than we ever gave you credit for. I nodded, the weight between us shifting, lighter somehow. Ethan lingered at the edge of the crowd, hands buried in his pockets. When our eyes met, he gave a small, almost sheepish smile. "Lauren," he said quietly, "I'm glad you found your path." I inclined my head, nothing more. Whatever recognition he sought wasn't mine to give. Turning back to Madison and my parents, I felt a quiet certainty settle in my chest. Tonight wasn't about vengeance or proving anyone wrong. It was about claiming the space I'd carved out of my own heartbreak and setting the terms for those who wanted to be part of my life. Warmth from the overhead lights touched my shoulders. I touched the locket, feeling its engraving like a heartbeat beneath my fingertips. These were my conditions, spoken or unspoken. Honesty, respect, and the courage to grow. For them. For me. The night thinned into its quiet hours, when even laughter softens and music drifts like a lullaby. The band's final notes faded, leaving the gentle rustle of skirts and the clink of glasses as guests began to slip away. I stepped outside into the cool Oregon air. The sky stretched wide and dark, the stars just beginning to burn through the velvet. Damp grass pressed a faint sweetness into the breeze. Behind me, the hall glowed like a lantern. Through the tall windows, I could see Madison dancing with Ethan, her veil removed now, her face still flushed with new promises. For the first time all evening, there was no pinch in my chest, only a quiet acceptance. The door creaked open. Madison joined me on the stone steps, a shawl draped over her shoulders. She leaned her head lightly against mine. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For not giving up on me. For tonight. For everything." I smiled, a slow warmth spreading where hurt had once lived. "Sisters are a lifetime contract," I said softly. "We can stumble, but we don't quit." She squeezed my hand, her fingers trembling slightly in the night chill. "I'm going to be better at this. At us." "I know," I said. And I meant it. Our parents emerged a few minutes later, my mother looping her arm through mine. She didn't speak, but the quiet pride in her touch said enough. I tipped my face toward the sky, the locket cool against my skin. My grandmother's words echoed like a gentle heartbeat. "Keep your courage close." For years, I had clutched those words like a lifeline through sleepless nights and long days of self-doubt. Tonight, they felt less like a shield and more like a quiet truth. I had kept my courage close. And in doing so, I had found something even stronger, grace. I turned to Madison, to my parents, to the life I had built, and the one still unfolding. "I'm ready," I said simply. Not for revenge. Not for recognition. For everything ahead. The wind lifted a strand of my hair and carried it into the starlight. I let it go, smiling. Because the greatest vow I had ever taken, the one that mattered more than any wedding promise, was the vow I made to myself.